for it found that the yoke was easy, and that the law, instead of being a terrible thing that was going to take away from it every liberty and freedom, was really bringing it into a relationship with insight, or a relationship with knowledge. The shepherd could make life better for the ox. The boy could make the life of the animal more secure. For human wisdom, or the wisdom of philosophy, can protect not only the inner part of man's nature, but also his outer nature as well, if man himself will permit. So a friendship is established between the ox and the boy, and the two together now head in the same direction. Through the beginnings of wisdom, a fraternity, a relationship, a kinship has been built between the consciousness in man and the body which must fulfill the works of consciousness. Buddha very directly in his own teachings explains that it is not the purpose of the doctrine to make the personality a troubled creature, or to take away from man any of the really good things which he can enjoy or hope to have. The purpose of consciousness is to enrich the person, so that the things we have become really meaningful, that joy becomes real joy, that insight becomes real insight, that understanding becomes a practical instrument for the achievement of everything that is reasonable and desirable. Once man has accepted the yoke of the doctrine, everything in his life is made simpler, made more convenient for him. He moderates his intensities and has less pain and sorrow. He controls his appetites and his body is healthier. He achieves moderation of goods and his worries are fewer. And so under the guidance of the boy, the ox begins his gradual transformation. And you will notice in the picture that when the boy has finally got the bridle on the ox, the nose, the very tip of the ox's nose, has turned white. Up to that time, it was all black. Of course, the black ox was the symbol of ignorance, of darkness, of benightedness. But after the yoke has been placed upon the animal, the place where the yoke is has turned white. This is the beginning of the transmutation of the ox. It is the beginning of the transformation of character. Also, as you look, you will observe that the landscape has changed. The dark clouds are gone. There are pleasant trees and mountains and a beautiful expanse of water. It is a very much more charming, verdant land than it was before. And the ox is slowly and ponderously turning in its course to follow the leadership of the boy. This is also the beginning of discipline. For in one hand now, the boy carries a rod. Now, we do not see the boy injure the animal with the rod, but the thought or concept of discipline is introduced. In this case, the discipline represents the leadership of consciousness over the body. It means that the boy now has the advantage. He is able to command the body, and maybe reluctantly, the body will obey. It has been a very delicate operation to get this far in this partnership. And working as we do all the time with folks, I may say that getting that halter on to the bowl has taken many a sincere person 10 or 15 years of hard work. Always remember that that first effort is the most difficult. We resent so desperately the very solutions to our problems. Worshipping this sense of the right to do anything we please, we forget to please to do anything. Still we maintain that we have this inalienable right to be miserable, to fulfill whatever purpose we intend. And any subtraction from this privilege is tyranny, even though the teacher may be wiser than we are. If the teacher interferes with our right to do as we please, he is a tyrant. So it is quite a strategic undertaking to finally reach the point where the personality, with its mind, emotions, and psychic integration, is willing to accept the leadership of the consciousness itself. But here the bull has finally done so, and the end of its nose is appropriately emerging from the dark cloud of its own matter or materialism. And the reason why the end of the nose is probably so pictured first is because the first release is on the level of the most physical of our appetites. It is on the level of our sensory perception, represented by the face of the animal. And having gone this far, we turn the page and we come to the third picture of the bull. And here we have a very docile, pleasant scene indeed. Here the bull is following the boy along the edge of a pleasant stream. And we cannot but remember the words of the psalmist, "He leadeth me beside the still waters." Well, that is exactly what is happening in the picture, precisely what is happening. The boy no longer has his rod either. He is now carrying a flowering branch, which again suggests, perhaps, the mysterious rod of Joseph that budded, or the mysterious shepherd's staff of Tannhäuser. At this stage in the development of the theme, the entire head of the ox is now white. This means its rational or upper part, the highest part of the personality, the mind, is now liberated, at least theoretically, from bondage. The ox, however, is still haltered, and the boy is still holding the cord. Principle must still lead. The consciousness must still direct the way. Otherwise, the ox would stray and would not continue its journey. But the mind, now having been relieved of its darkness, represented by the head turning white, shows an immediate fondness for the boy. The ox and the boy are now truly comrades. And the ox is very happy in this newfound relationship. And in this relationship we find something of philosophy. For in philosophy the mind has accepted the leadership of consciousness. The mind has taken over a certain rulership even over the body itself. Like the great enlightened thinker, the sage, the seer. The mind has resolved to follow in the footsteps of the leader, of the boy, and finds its greatest joy now in an obedience which once it resented. With the mind more clearly developed, the purposes of life become more obvious. It is no longer necessary to tempt the ox with better fodder or fine foods. It is simple enough for the ox to understand the commands of the boy. Therefore, in this scene, the boy is speaking to the ox. and the ox understands him. There is now the relationship between consciousness and an instrument being developed within the personality itself, which understands consciousness and can respond naturally and properly to the commands that consciousness gives. So here is almost the relationship of master and disciple in the old Eastern way of learning. For in the old way, the disciple was the servant of a master. Surely this servitude was done only for one purpose, the good of the disciple. But in all the older systems, the disciple was taught absolute obedience. He had no right to question or doubt the will of his teacher. He had only the right to accept immediately any demand placed upon him. And the demands were usually such as would humble his pride, or demand from him great patience or resignation, endurance and tranquility of spirit under pressure. These were the things that the philosophy of life dealt with. So now the ox, with its fine white head, follows quietly behind the boy. The rope is slack. The animal is following mostly of its own accord. It just needs a little leadership now and then. And consciousness itself turns back a little to encourage the ox to come along the way of life. Very simple, natural little pattern. The next theme, the transmutation of the ox, is continued, and now the area of the heart is white. The animal is white in the entire forepart of the body. This means that not only has the mind been regenerated and elevated, but now the emotions have been purified. The desires have been transformed. And the most difficult problem that man ever has to face, the pressure of appetite, has been successfully met. We can often reason things out. And if the reason has a chance, we may win. But when some terrible passion racks the body, we are unable to control. That which is a vast emotional strain eclipses reason, drives us from our reasonable purposes, blinds us to the consequences of our own conduct, and under the pressure or stress of emotion, we are no longer thoughtful or rational creatures. But now the bull or the ox has reached the point where this part of its nature is also transmuted and regenerated. And now another very interesting thing is happening. The boy is now tying the ox to a tree. This tying the ox to the tree instead of to the boy becomes therefore the next step or part of this transformation or transmutation. The boy represents the spirit, the consciousness, the insight, the natural good in man, seeking to bring the body into a state of redeemed relationship with life. But the tree has a greater meaning. And all through the mystery of Buddhism, the tree plays a tremendously important part. It was under a tree in the garden of the palace of Kapilavastu that Buddha was born. It was under a tree at Bodh Gaya near Madras that the Buddha was illuminated. And it was under a group of trees on the Indian roadside that Buddha entered the Parinirvana. All through his life, the symbol of the tree went with him. And in ancient Buddhist art, particularly in India, the tree was always a symbol of the doctrine. The tree was the great protecting